This is on MSNBC. This will be the day after the G.20 Summit over in Japan. Let's listen to what the commentator has to say, and in the pretense of what she's saying it in, as far as bringing various things out that are extremely abnormal to an American president. Let's please listen as we try to pay attention, looking at the unforeseeables, the unintended consequences that can occur because of this type of reckless carelessness of a United States president. I've said all along that I support our president as being a good patriot, but I've also said all along there are certain policies about the Trump administration that I don't agree with. One of them, I think it's common to know, is pertaining to climate change. We're dealing with a president that refuses to acknowledge that climate change is real in the degree of what the human race, the Homo sapien race, is doing to the outer atmosphere as well as the inner atmosphere. But for him to be buddying up with a known adversary pertaining to the Saudi princes, the royal family, is irking and sickening, to say the least, in what you're fixing to see. So please, let's analyze this together as we dissect this data.
Donald Trump thinks standing up to Russia and warning Vladimir Putin not to interfere in next year's election is a joke. In fact, he thinks that what Russia did to attack our sovereignty in 2016 was a joke on us, because it helped make him president. But Putin wasn't the only authoritarian Donald Trump was sucking up to at the G20. He also took in a breakfast meeting with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man the CIA concluded ordered the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi last year, who Trump calls his friend. And Trump also cozied up to China's president for life, Xi Jinping, as well as Vladimir Putin. My next guest has probably written more eloquently than anybody else about the impact of Trump's preference for dictators. And joining me now is Masha Gessen, author of The Future is History. And Masha, thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to go through and play you a few little bites of Donald Trump at the G20 this week. Here's Donald Trump, and this is cut number one, talking about Vladimir Putin in an interview on state TV earlier today.
He's a great guy. I think we had a really good, that's okay. We had a great meeting. I think he's a terrific person. We accomplished a lot. We're actually starting to talk about trade. And I mean, we should have trade between Russia and the United States, two great countries. So we had a very good meeting yesterday. He's a terrific person.
You know, Masha, I was talking with Keir Simmons in an earlier block, our reporter out of the London Bureau, just about the pictures that I used to see coming out of the G20. It would be the American president surrounded by the Britons and the French and maybe the Italians and just other leaders of the West. The pictures of Donald Trump are Donald Trump with autocrats, seeming to want to surround himself with them, be with them, calling Putin a great guy, wanting to convene with them. No real images of him with our traditional allies. What do you make of Donald Trump's remaking of the relationship between the United States and the world?
I think, as with so many things that have happened over the Trump presidency, this is something that we need to be constantly taking stock of, and we're not, because of the insane news cycle.
Because of the insane news cycle is what she just said. You know, it used to be white and black, right and wrong, good and bad. There wasn't no second guessing. It wasn't no playing in the middle. For Congress to have stopped selling weapons to the Saudis, and for us to have known that the Saudis masterminded 9/11, and for us to have known through the Turkish government that has already been declared through the CIA that they did plan the journalist's death, of it being premeditated, and for our president to remain sided with the Saudis is irking. It's sickening to me, and like I have said before, I am very political patriot in standing up for our country, but whenever we have a president that is doing some very, very contrast things according to the will of the American people, then is whenever I start scratching my head. Now, is this really worthy towards me holding on to my patriotism towards this president? Because I knowingly know the facts in behind the Saudis. Please, let's listen.
But yes, this summit allows us to see just how profoundly the United States has changed in its positioning in the world. And how Trump is basically expressing his very natural personal preference. We used to, we were for a couple of years obsessed with this idea that maybe he was owned by Russia, maybe he was somehow beholden to Putin. But what he's really expressing, right? There's no simple explanation, except what he's really expressing is that this is what he thinks political power is. This is what his natural allegiances are. This is where his natural interests lie.
His natural allegiance, his allegiance should be to the American people and the will of the American people, not to thugs that he's standing beside right now on the left-hand side. And whenever I say thugs, I do mean thugs, because if the circumstance would have been turned on the other foot to the point that the individual that he's standing beside right now, the Crown Prince, if somebody would have shot one of his $160 million drones down out of the sky, knowing that his drone was flying in proper airspace, he would have immediately bombed the Iranians or the Afghanistans or the Pakistans or whoever, because these people are not to be trusted in any form pertaining to that type of power, pertaining to nuclear armament. And you talk about a tinderbox that is just ready to explode. It doesn't surprise me one day to the next that I wake up and I'm possibly going to see a mushroom cloud hanging over parts of the Middle East somewhere where somebody has engineered a nuclear bomb and now they have blown about 500,000 people up, or possibly even more, pertaining to nuclear armament. Let's just listen.
And also that he, I think people tend to think of Vladimir Putin only as the guy who controls Donald Trump, or who, seeks to break up the United States and the NATO alliance and sort of destroy us and crush us by manipulating our president. Sort of that's the sinister view of Putin. But there's also another view, which is that he is ideologically aligned with Donald Trump and the people who vote for Donald Trump, that they actually believe in the same things. It's not just Trump. I want you to listen to Vladimir Putin talking about liberalism. And I think Donald Trump thought he meant another kind of liberalism, but let's a full screen. Let me read it to you. In an interview, in an FT interview with the Kremlin on the eve of the G.20 Summit in Osaka, Japan, the Russian president said the liberal idea had outlived its purpose as the public turned against immigration, open borders, and multiculturalism. Liberals cannot simply dictate anything to anyone, just like they have been attempting to do over the recent decade. That sounds like any Republican you could just grab out of Congress or off the street. So Putin kind of is Trump.
I've heard it say, and I agree, that we serve under the pretense here in America under two different governments that are governed in two different ways. We have the richest of the rich, the powerfulest of the powerful, that have come together in supposedly sticking together in making sure that there isn't going to be some sort of a nuclear catastrophe somewhere. And then you have the lower parts of the government that actually govern the people. When you have these two areas that are contradictory of each other, of the powerfulest of the powerful versus the regular government that we serve under, that's whenever you have a problem pertaining to governing establishments that has been put in place for the will of the people. Not the will of the rich, not the will of the powerful, but the will of the people. Then is whenever you have to start scratching your head about true dynamic democratic democracy. Because you have to start wondering, okay, the people believe this, but the rich believe that. And whenever you have that occurring in such of a abnormal way that you can obviously see here, whenever Congress says, hey, we believe that the Saudis isn't supposed to be trusted, and we're going to stop selling them any arms over there in the Middle East, and your CIA puts out a briefing saying, yes, we believe that the Saudis masterminded and premeditated the death of one of their journalists. And whenever you have Congress that gives an open green light towards being able to sue the Saudi government for the assaults that happened during 9/11, it's pretty obvious that you got one group of people that's thinking in one direction, but then you have another group of people pertaining to the powerful and the rich that's thinking in another direction. These are conflicting interests. Conflicting interests that our ancestors did not intend for this government to abide by. And it is unusual to see a president that contradicts himself in many, many ways, because he'll say one thing out of one side of his mouth to the people, to us, towards how that he is opposing to the Russian government and how that he's opposing to this and how that he's opposing to that. But then whenever he steps out onto the big stage with the big mic, he talks a different talk. So you have to ask yourself a question: what is really going on here pertaining to the powers that we rule under or that are being ruled over pertaining to our government? You have to ask the $64,000 question, which is, what the hell is going on here? Let's listen to the rest of this.
Exactly. I mean, when I saw that quote, and it's remarkable because, this is something that in the past Putin's people have said. He has never quite come out and said this in so many words, right? So there's actually a process that we're observing, which is that Trump is emboldening Putin, Putin is emboldening Trump. And this rhetoric is becoming the dominant rhetoric in the world. Right, and this idea that, again, Putin's people have been running around with for years, which is that there's multiculturalism is a terrible thing, that something is getting forced down our throats, that there's nothing, and this is an important quote from one of his thinkers, there's nothing universal about universal human rights. Right? And we're seeing, for example, the United States State Department form a special working group on revisiting the idea of human rights. And I don't think it's because Trump is Putin's puppet. It's because there's actually like a natural convergence of thinking.
What did she just say? Listen to what she just said. I'm going to back it up.
And let me...
Stop.
I don't think it's because Trump is Putin's puppet. It's because there's actually like a natural convergence of thinking.
Natural conversion of the thinking. The fact of the matter is, we are Americans. We are Americans, and we do embrace other foreign measures to be able to come into America to become Americans. But just because we do that out of the good heartedness of our country doesn't mean that we're going to conform to being, let's say, Russians, or we're going to conform to being Australians, or we're going to conform towards being Europeans, or we're going to conform towards being Asians, or the people from India. That's where the controversy is now openly being seen through the eyes of the general public whenever they see what we see and we understand what we understand. In other words, it has went too far in substituting the original format of what our ancestors intended for this government to be run by. It's gone entirely too far. And let's back it up one more time, because I want you to hear the what she's got to say. Right there.
Form a special working group on revisiting the idea of human rights. And I don't think it's because Trump is Putin's puppet. It's because there is actually like a natural conversion of thinking.
A natural conversion of the thinking that is happening on the upper epillage, on the highest of the high government officials.
And let me play really quickly. Donald Trump talked about another dictator, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and calling him his friend. Take a listen.
The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a friend of mine, a man who has really done things in the last 5 years in terms of opening up Saudi Arabia, and I think especially what you've done for women. I'm seeing what's happening. It's like a revolution in a very positive way, and I want
to stop right there. To hear President Trump talking right now, you would have thought that these extreme events that the Saudis has opened up to has been opened up to for years and years and years. For many, many years, they have conformed. These people are just now conforming towards allowing for women to have the privilege and the right of driving an automobile. Just within the past 2 years. Just within the past 2 years, they have finally opened their eyes up to a deep, dark, hidden, evil regime of how that they was dealing with human rights, especially with women. I mean, these are people that he's sitting across from that cut people's hands and fingers off because that you have stolen, or will kill somebody in a heartbeat if you oppose their government openly. These are the same people that he's sitting across from right now, that if you get caught on their government with with a holy King James Version Bible, you are not only substitute of being arrested, but you are substitute of being executed. Executed. Right then and there on the spot, because you have a King James Version Bible. Let's back this one up a little bit and get the full extent towards what's being said here.
just
Right here.
And let me play
Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a friend of mine, a man who has really done things in the last 5 years in terms of opening up Saudi Arabia, and
He did mention 5 years. I apologize about that. He did mention 5 years, indicating that the things that he's talking about has occurred in less than a 5-year term.
think especially what you've done for women. I'm seeing what's happening. It's like a revolution in a very positive way, and I want to just thank you on behalf of a lot of people, and I want to congratulate you. You've done really a spectacular job.
And you know, Masha, I think people who watch the show know that I don't like playing Donald Trump's sides. I don't play him very much because I don't see the need to advance his propaganda by playing clips of him. However, I still retain the capacity to be shocked watching an American president genuflect before dictators, prostrate himself in front of Putin, genuflect before Mohammed bin Salman. I've never seen an American president do that. It is shocking to me as an American. Your thoughts? I don't have a question.
I don't know. I have. This is one of those times when you shouldn't be on television saying you have no words. But I have no words. You know, Trump. I mean, also the rhetoric that he is using, right? All that he has done for women. Just Donald Trump, right? Talking on behalf of Saudi women. And you can't. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make that. Very quickly before we go, at the same time that Donald Trump is taking women's babies out of their hands, and his administration is ripping their children away and throwing them in cages and having them sleep in nothing but a dirty diaper on the floor. Very quickly, your thoughts on the detention camps that we are now running the other side of what we're doing, which is becoming the kind of country we used to send monitors to.
Well, I think we need to start using the words concentration camps. And I had a column about this in the New Yorker last week where I sort of tried to analyze the debate about AOC's use of the term concentration camp. I think it's an argument about how we see ourselves in history. And, you know, we think that history is something that happened to other people a long time ago. And that what's happening with us is inevitably smaller because there's all this other stuff going on. But what's going to remain in history is that this country created camps for people who are exercising their legal right to seek asylum, concentration camps.
Yeah. It's shocking, but I think you have to keep the capacity to be shocked. I think it's our only hope. Masha Gessen, I always love talking with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
She said that she didn't have words. I've got words. My words are, white man speaketh with forked tongue. Being a hypocrite. Saying one thing to his people while he's on his property over here on American soil, but saying something totally different while he's over there. Now, does this mean that there's not some sort of a big plan that our administration that's in power right now is not pre-plan off on those dictators or those people that's in power over there? Does this mean that there's not some sort of a inside tactical plan that once he gets back here that's going to be fully exposed to the American people? I can't say. I don't know what's going on in our president's head. I don't know what's going on in the administration's plans. But I know that from the outside looking in, as a spectator, just as these two people just got through discussing, it does not look good for an American president to be rubbing shoulders and elbows with people that we know has the tendencies of being so cruel in human rights affairs pertaining to our policies, what we believe in, who we are, what we are.
Thank you. And coming up, how Senator Kamala Harris changed the 2020 game.
Am I creamy up?
More AM Joy after the break.
When you need brutal honesty.
This is political insanity.
When you need a passionate start to the morning.
Name one of the Democratic contenders. Name one that you were positive can beat Trump.
When you need to go deep inside Washington.
What's your view of your party's prominent members' drift towards socialism?
And hear from someone who's been there.
It's not about being too progressive or being too conservative. It's about having a message.
You need your Morning Joe, weekdays at 6, only on MSNBC.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
That powerful moment from Senator Kamala Harris at Thursday's Democratic debate may have cracked the entire foundation of frontrunner Joe Biden's campaign. It also gave voters a glimpse of what it would look like for a woman prosecutor, a woman of color, to take on Donald Trump in a general election debate. And joining me now is actor and host Yvette Nicole Brown, who is adorable, and I did not ask you to do that.
No, this is my choice.
President and CEO of Voto Latino, Karine Jean-Pierre, Chief Public Affairs Officer at MoveOn.org. Yvette has thrown me completely off. And E.J. Dionne, author of One Nation Under Trump. My pal, this is a friend block. Okay, I have to cut to you first because you are my publicist now. Okay, so Yvette, you know, it was interesting to me that the first night and the second night were really different. Totally different. Of the debate, right? Yes. The first night felt like everyone was sort of introducing themselves and sort of not paying attention to Trump.
Right.
And the second night, it was more about conflict.
It was a cage
with
fight.
Trump,
yes,
but also with Biden.
Yes.
What do you make of Kamala Harris' decision to go there with Biden?
You know, I had a conversation with a friend who felt like it was out of line. This is from another black woman, and I was like, no, if she's bothered by it, if it affected her, it's something that she should speak about.
Right.
I respected that she chose that moment. I think that Biden, Uncle Joe, has been sliding by a little bit because of name recognition and the whole Barack Obama thing. I need him to stand on his own 2 feet. I need him to win votes because of him.
Yeah.
Not because of anybody else or anything he's done. I'm not coming for Uncle Joe. That's great.
Yeah.
But I respect what she did, and I understand why she did it, and it does linger. Things like that linger.
Yeah, and you know, Karine Jean-Pierre, you're uniquely positioned here because you obviously, you know, worked for Joe Biden's best friend, and that he loves to remind us is his best friend in the entire world on earth, Barack Hussein Obama, best friend of Joe Biden, okay? You worked on the campaign, you worked in the White House.
Yeah.
Joe Biden is sort of, he does feel like he's drafting on the Obama friendship. And that he isn't. Some of the reporting is that he isn't really focusing in his you know, prep for the debates. That he does kind of feel like, I'm Obama's friend. What more do you want from me? Kamala Harris clearly understood the road to the nomination goes through Biden.
Yes.
You have to defeat Biden, and
yes,
she seemed to be the only one who understood that.
Yeah.
I want to stop right there. Basically, I've gotten the message across towards what needs to be distributed out to my viewers in regard to all this. But I kind of see each administration setting things up for the next administration in a way of, I don't know if you'd call it pre-orchestrated atmospheric conditions that knowing that the next administration is going to have to deal with. But it's just like us where we are right now in 2009 with Donald Trump. Do you not think that certain smart people, forecasters, analysts, back then, throughout the late 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s, do you not think that there was certain people back then could see where we was going to be today, exactly in the exact spot where we're at right now, with us being $22 trillion in debt and over 2.3 million people incarcerated either in our county, state, or local jails? federal jails? Sure they are. Sure they are. This has all been pre-planned. And it's almost like we're walking off into an entrapment deal as an American citizens toward just exactly what is occurring and how that it is occurring, especially on the upper epilage pertaining to the high-ranking officials all over the world. And we can now see how that this is being generated through the eyes of the normal, that we can now obviously understand that it's an entrapment deal towards what we're looking at here. And it's sad. It's extraordinarily sad, because where we are today is where they planned for us to be 25, 30 years ago. Where we are today is where they planned for us to be 25 and 30 years from this date. Where we go 25 years from this date, you've got people that's already assessed, pre-planned, people that's already done forecasted. This is where society's going to be 25, 30 years from this date, that they believe. Sometimes their forecasting may very well be way off. Let's listen.
President Moon Jae-in. They ate dinner Saturday night at the presidential residence that's called the Blue House. And in a few hours, the two will meet for another round of talks. Mr. Trump has also extended an invitation to the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, the U.S. president offering to meet at the border separating North and South Korea. He says it could just be a quick hello at the demilitarized zone. Before he left the G.20 Summit in Japan, Mr. Trump holding a press conference telling reporters that North Korea had responded favorably to the idea. CNN's Will Ripley is in Seoul, South Korea, and a short time ago, he and I spoke about Mr. Trump's handshake diplomacy with Kim Jong-un.
We know that President Trump is certainly a master of creating suspense and dramatic moments wherever he is. So this tweet sort of suggesting this impromptu hello with Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone, likely there's a little bit more to it than that. We have had inklings for a number of days now that President Trump's trip here to South Korea would include a trip to the demilitarized zone and possibly some sort of interaction with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But what we didn't know were the details in terms of would the North Koreans agree to it? Would they not? Well, the fact that the North Koreans, shortly after President Trump tweeted about that potential handshake at the DMZ, they responded favorably. President Trump later said that they actually got in contact with his administration and that Kim Jong-un follows his Twitter. It seems as if the president is pretty certain that there might be something happening tomorrow. When reporters asked President Trump if he would walk across the military demarcation line, he said he would. He said he'd feel comfortable doing that. So here you have a situation where President Trump would have an opportunity for a historic moment to be the first sitting U.S. president to step across the military demarcation line onto North Korean territory and to also reset diplomacy with Kim Jong-un after that disaster of a summit in Hanoi when President Trump walked out. The North Koreans were left bewildered. They've launched a couple of short-range ballistic missiles since then. They expressed that they were very upset about the failure to reach any sort of deal in Hanoi. This could be a chance for a photo op, for a friendly exchange of some kind, and then perhaps it could get diplomacy back on track. And when you're dealing with a country as unique as North Korea, you have to take a very unique approach, and President Trump is certainly doing that once again with this tweet and this potential visit to the DMZ here in South Korea tomorrow.
And that was Will Ripley in Seoul speaking to us a short time ago. Well, at President Trump's last stop, the G20 Summit in Japan, he sat down with China's President Xi Jinping to talk trade. And they agreed to restart trade talks and hold off on imposing any new tariffs. I asked our Nick Robertson in Osaka what we should make of that.
It seems to be positive, at least, the hiccup that it was potentially going to spark a global recession really seems to be averted for just now. But I think the devil's in the detail here because we don't know the detail. What President Trump says he's agreed to here is not to put on any additional tariffs on any Chinese goods. Okay, that's in the plus column. The Chinese, though, seem to be hankering after having President Trump getting rid of the existing tariffs. That's not going to happen. happen. President Trump's going to keep those existing tariffs in place. The two sides are going to continue to talk. But another thing that's big on the agenda for China is the issue of Huawei, the 5G network provider that President Trump says is a national security threat to the United States, for the U.S. to buy its equipment, and tells his allies the same thing as well. Now, he did say, as far as Huawei was concerned, that some U.S. manufacturers can sell sort of non-significant components and parts for it. That's what they're doing at the moment. So kind of no change there, but it does put President Xi's mind at rest a little bit. But China, I think, wanted that issue moved a little further in their favor, and President Trump saying, hold on, not so fast, we'll do that later on in the trade talks. So we don't know the detail. The good news is, as you say, the trade talks are on, but we kind of saw this at the last G20. So how long is this period of conversation, these restarted talks, how long is that actually going to last? Potentially it could fall out again and they could be back to, raising tariffs on each other. I think that's the best read of it at the moment.
Nick Robertson speaking to us last hour from Osaka, Japan. Millions of Europeans face more scorching temperatures this weekend. Tropical winds coming from Africa have prompted record highs in France, Spain, Italy, and Germany all week long. The mercury hit 45.9 degrees Celsius in one French village. That's 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Hundreds of firefighters are battling wildfires triggered by the heat. Sporadic power blackouts are reported as stores and restaurants crank up their air conditioning units if they have them. Health officials are pleading with residents across the continent to take it easy and drink plenty of water. For more on what Europeans are dealing with this weekend, let's go to Saskia Vadon in Paris. And Saskia, you're surrounded by people trying to beat the heat, right?
Once more, we're dealing with a president that does not acknowledge atmospheric changes as far as global warming. Let's please pay very close attention to the signs that the Bible talks about, that you will be able to detect becoming closer and closer towards that mighty grand day where God himself will come and take out the elect from the planet. Because the Bible says that as you shall see the days approaching, that no flesh shall be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he has chosen, those days would be shortened. In other words, these extreme weather events are intensifying. 115 degrees in Europe, around Paris, over in that area. Let's listen.
I am indeed, and I have to say we are experiencing the hottest part of the day here. I'm right in front of the iconic fountains of the Trocadero, right next to the Eiffel Tower, and people here are making the most of the water here. It's basically turned into a water park. I have to say the water is looking more inviting by the minute. But a lot is being done to help people stay cool here in Paris. We've got mist showers that have been set up all across the city, and fountains, and you have the French government who's been handing out, been helping people hand out bottles of water at train stations. Now I'm here joined by Ashton, who is a tourist from the UK, and it's not just Parisians that are suffering, we have tourists as well. So Ashton, how has the heat affected your trip here?
Well, when we came here, we were not really expecting it to be that hot. We were expecting it to be nice and warm, and it has gotten really hot in the last couple of days. So obviously we had to change the plans of how we were making our itinerary. So more indoorsy things, more museums, more art galleries during the daytime, and the parks and outdoorsy sort of things for later in the evening time. And of course had to keep water with us all the time. Yeah.
And have you been discovering a kind of different part of Paris because of the heat? Have you been to places that you perhaps wouldn't have gone to?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look at this, it's amazing, and we have heard that it doesn't open for the tourists to take shower very often, so it's really beautiful. And you're sitting right next to Eiffel Tower, it can't get any more beautiful than that. And yesterday we went where we were still swimming in the river, and a canal with a lot of locals, not a lot of tourists there at all. And that was one of the amazing experiences that I will always remember for the rest of my life.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashton. So there you have it, making the best of the heat. Rick?
Sounds like he's got a pretty good attitude about it. Saskia, thanks very much. And now moving to Women's World Cup, where the Netherlands has just secured a spot in the semifinals for the very first time. The Dutch team beating Italy 2-0 in their quarterfinal game a short time ago. In about a half an hour from now, Germany will face off with Sweden in the second quarterfinals match of the day. Amanda Davis keeping an eye on all the action for us, joining us now live from Paris. And we've got one match in the books. We've got one more to go.
When this planet becomes inhabitable because of the extreme heat, society will become cave dwellers, because they'll go underground in trying to be survivalist. And once they go underground as being cave dwellers, then humanity will change drastically in the future, simply because people did not recognize the signs and they did not take heed to what the experts was telling them, going all the way back to the early 1990s, whenever Al Gore tried to tell not just the Tennesseans, but the people all over the world, that these atmospheric changes was actually real and that they was happening. It has reached the point over in India. I believe it's India, it may be Africa, but I think it's India, where the starvation of people pertaining to water is astronomical in the hardship that has befallen upon to that great nation. That somebody has the ideal of taking a towboat and grabbing a hold of some icebergs and trying to draw them all the way over to that area where the droughts are extreme. That's where we are today as a society, as a surviving society, simply because of all the gizmos and gadgets, all the motors, all the artificial heat that we're distributing out into the atmosphere, all the ozones, the gas, and plus draining all the oil and the gas resources from the inner of the earth. That is where we are today. We are in the process of dragging large, humongous glaciers from Antarctica to try to give the people water. And we're not talking about just a little piece of ice, floating ice. We're talking about a piece of ice that's like 2,000 feet long, 2,000 feet wide, and I don't know, probably another 2,000 feet submerging into the water, and possibly 1,000 feet submerging out of the water. We're talking about a big chunk of ice, but they claim that even at that rate, it would take at least 10 to 12 pieces of ice being dragged across two different oceans just to be able to accommodate those people's needs that they're going through right now. Israel, over in Jerusalem, they have manufactured a piece of machinery, a factory, that will literally take the salt out of the salt water over into that area that will feed and accommodate their people. And they actually are producing more water today than what they can consume. Now that, to me, is very, very smart ingenuity thinking in how that they can take seawater and transfer it into something that's drinkable to where it will help the survival rate of that area. And I'm pretty sure that's what other continents, other countries are going to have to do, rather than dragging a big piece of ice that's going to probably take a month to get there. And by the time it does get there, they're probably going to lose 20-25% of that piece of ice. It's going to be melting in the hot waters of the oceans. And I don't even know that it's feasibly possible or not, because I mean, there are certain times of the year in the oceans that you really don't have no business being in. Even if you had a large crater, something huge, you really just don't have no business being out there, but just dragging a big chunk of ice. So, to my viewers, global warming is real. We have a president that don't believe that it's real, but environmental changes are real, is the bottom line. And what he's doing over there pertaining to rubbing shoulders with all the dictators that we know are savages to various cultures and various continents of even their own people, what they're up to, the American president and the American administration, has yet to be fully revealed to the American people. Good luck to all of us, and God bless, and thank you for allowing for me to be a part of your lives in bringing forth this message. Thank you.